feel free to dance around your living room. There you go, there you go. A little bit of Linus and Lucy to get us started off with tonight. I hope you all are doing well. Welcome, welcome one and all. Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Thank you for joining us on this lesson on how chords move, getting from here to there. Remember the old Dr. Seuss book where you had the little awkward little hands and he said, getting from here to there. That was the image that I had in my mind for this one. There's a PDF that goes along with this, so make sure and download that. This is going to be part one of, I think, a two-part little mini-series on how chords move. How can you get from one chord to another chord creatively? So let's start with basically a couple of delineations here. We're going to talk about, in this first part, we're going to talk about how you make chord moves to major chords, like if I'm in any key, the 1 chord or the 4 chord would be major. The 5 chord's major too, but we don't really talk about that on its own as a landing spot. The 5 chord is not usually a landing spot. The 2 chords that are landing spots in any key is going to be the 1 chord and the 4 chord. And then we also have resolutions that go to minor, which would be to the 2, to the 3, to the 6. We're not going to be talking about the minor ones in this part. We're going to be talking about the major ones. Now, I wrote things, it may be unfamiliar to you. We're not going to get too deep into the theory, but we are going to see things written in Roman numerals to show you really their theory function. So a capital Roman numeral is going to be, that little I is going to be the 1 chord, and it's capital, so it's major. If you see a little two lowercase i's with an M, that would be a minor chord, so 2 minor. So we're going to be referring to their Roman numeral delineations there within a key. So we're going to be doing these in the key of C, but these can apply to any key. So you don't have to learn all of these. This is just for your own edification of how we can move and make creative chord choices depending on what we want to do. So take a look at the first page. The most basic of all chord resolutions, cadences as we call them in the business, is going from a 5 chord to a 1 chord. So if I'm in the key of C and I'm playing along in the key of C, and then I want to go from a 5 chord to a 1 chord. So we're talking about that particular transition there, getting us back to the 1 chord. So we're going to go, the most basic of all is a 5. So if you take a look at that first example, I'm in the key of C, so it'd be something like... Now, on all of these, I can add color tones, little extensions on the chord, and it's basically it's the same thing. So don't get the color tones, the ninths, the sevenths, the ninths, the 13ths, all that sort of stuff. Those are just decorations on the Christmas tree. The actual chord is still the same. So I could do maybe a C major 7th, G 13th, but it's still a dominant 7th, still a 7th, a 9th, 11th, a 13th. That's all kind of grouped into a 7th chord, a dominant function. So that second example there, C major 7th, kind of a jazzy sound, but it's still basically just a 1, a 5 to a 1. All right. Well, some of the other things that we do, that's the most basic one. Just throw a 5 chord before the major chord that you're trying to resolve to. Another one that you can do is do a 4 over a 5 chord, an F in the key of C, an F with a G in the bass, which is a chord that looks like this. So if I'm in the key of C, I can maybe kind of a C2, there's the 1, here comes the 4 over 5. Maybe I can add an F major 7th with a G in the bass. Just see how it's just a little bit more of a colorful way to do it. Maybe I could bar that first finger. So if I'm going anywhere, I can add the 4 over 5 of the key that I'm going to, of the 1 chord that I'm going to, and that will get me there. Let's say I'm going to maybe an F chord. Well, the 4 over 5 to that would be a B flat with a C in the bass. And that will get me there. A little secret on if you're doing any sort of key change, just go to a 4 over 5, 2 beats before the key you're going to, and it'll get you there. So let's say I'm in the key of C. Let's go to someplace completely unrelated. Let's say we're going to go to the key of E flat. An awkward chord change, an awkward transposition, key change. But if I throw a little A flat with a B flat, which is a 4 over 5, so if I did that, it'll be C. Do you see how that 1 chord helped me get anywhere? It's a 4 over 5. 4 over 5 or whatever you're going to gets you there. And that works on major chords. Take a look at the next page, page 2. I can elaborate that 5 to 1 cadence and make it a 2 minor to 5 to 1. So if I'm in the key of C, that would be D minor, G7. C. I've just elaborated on that little cadence there. I'll do it again. C, 2 minor, 5, 1. A 2-5-1, we call that in the biz. Now remember, I can still add my color tones to it. It's still the same thing. So look at the next one. I have a C major 7th. I did a D minor 9th, still a D minor, still that 2 minor, and then a G 13th to the C major 9th. Let's see how that sounds. Little 2-5-1. If I'm going to an F chord, then I do the 2 of the F, the 5 of the F, which would be a B flat, or excuse me, a C, resolving to the F. So if I'm going to an F chord, I would throw the its 2, G minor, 5, C7 to the F. And that will help me get to any major chord. Take a look at the next one. Here's a little twist on it. If I'm back in the key of C, not only can I do the 2 minor, I can do the 2-7. Okay, in the biz, we call this a secondary dominant, a dominant of the dominant. So the dominant would be the 5, and that would be in the key of C, a G7, C, D, E, F, G, G7. What would be the 5 of the G7? Well, now I have to think in the key of G for a second. G, A, B, C, D, a D7. So I can do a D7 to a G7 to a C. Let's see how that one sounds. Okay, now how I'm referring to these chords. Let's back up and let's just kind of talk about that. In any key, if I stack a triad, let's say I'm in the key of C, and I go through the scale, and I stack triads on all those. If I stack all those triads up, they make a consistent, predictable pattern of chords. The first chord, built off of the first step of the scale, is a major chord. We would call that the 1 chord in any key. The chord built off of the first chord in the major scale, that would be the 1 chord. Okay? The chord built off of the second step of the major scale ends up being a minor chord. So we call the 2 a minor. The chord built on the second step, that would be the 2, and it would be a minor chord. Same thing with the 3 chord. The chord built off of the third step of the major scale would end up being a minor chord. The fourth step, we're back to a major chord. So the 1 chord, the chord built off of the first, and the chord built off of the fourth step of the major scale, the triad, ends up both being major. So the 1 and the 4 chord we say is being major. The 5 chord is also major, but it's got a dominant 7th on it if you do a 4-note chord. The 6 chord ends up being minor. The 7 chord ends up being a diminished triad there. So this pattern is consistent in every key. So that's why when you're in the key of C, you're going to see a lot of C majors, F majors, G majors, but you're not going to see A majors. You're going to see A minors, because 2, the chord built off of the second step, the third step, and the 6th step are all minor. The chord built off of the 1, the 4, and the 5 are major. So when I say like a 4/5 chord, that means a 4, the F chord in the key of C, over the 5, which would be the G note. Remember, it's just a note with anything underneath the slash. So that'd be an F chord with a G in the bass. F chord with a G in the bass. And that's what I mean when I have an F of 4/5. So going back to page 2. So look, we can have a 2 minor going to G7. But I can also have a dominant 7th. That works too. It's kind of called a secondary dominant. I can expand that out even further. So not just a 5-1, not just a 2-5-1. I could even do 3-6-2-5. Those aren't random. This is a specific pattern of chords that you're going to see a lot. If I did a 3-6-2-5 progression, E minor to A minor 7th, D minor to G7. So all of this will eventually land me on the C where I'm trying to go. A 3-6-2-5. You see those a lot in jazz. Now, let me blow your mind a little bit. You can interchange the minor chords and the dominant with a dominant 7th chord. So I could just as easily, instead of the E minor, A minor, D minor, I'm going to put an E7, A7, D7, G7. Now I can't really mess with the 5 because that's the official 5 that jumps to the 1. So he's always going to be a dominant 7th. But on these other ones, I can sometimes switch in, a dominant 7th for the minors or a minor 7th for the dominant 7th. So instead of an E minor, A minor 7th, D minor 7th, G7, I could do an E7, A7, D7, G7, C. Do you see how it sounds a little bit different? That sounds a little more jazzy. And remember, I can add color tones to all those as well. So take a look at top of page 3. What if I mixed the majors and minors, and the minors and the dominants? Remember, I still have to keep that G. He's still going to be a 7. But look what I could do. I could add E7 sharp 9, maybe an A augmented with a sharp 9, to a D minor 9th. So there I went back to the minor. The augmented, that's still a 7th chord. So that's still a 7th, dominant 7th tonality there. The great jazz guitarist Joe Pass thinks of it like this, and this has always been helpful to me. There's basically only 3 categories. Major 7th chords, which would cover major 7ths, major 9ths, major 13ths. all that sort of stuff. Major 7th, flat 5, major 9th, sharp 11. Anything major 7th, that's all going to be in the category 1. The next category is minor. So you can have D minors, minor 7th, minor 9th, minor 11th, minor 13th, minor 7 flat 5s. All that sort of stuff is kind of in the second category of minor type chords. The third category of chords is you have your dominant 7th, chords that have a flatted 7th in them. Not the regular 7th, like a C major 7th would be C, E, G, B. A dominant 7th would be a C, E, G, B flat. So anything like a C 9th, a C 7th, a C 13th, a C 11th, a C, augmented, all of that would be in this third category of dominant chords. And there's a lot of them in there. Sharp 9, sharp 5, flat 5, all that sort of variation. Those are all dominant type chords. So if we listen to that top progression there, 3, 6, 2, 5, with some color tones added in there. All right, so now we've gone down that trail a little bit. Let's go down another trail. We're going to talk about, instead of a 5-to-1, we're going to do a 4-to-1 cadence. That sounds like this. 4. Okay, that's kind of like if you're singing in a hymn in a church, a lot of times the last things would be an amen, not an 5-1, not that, a 4-1. It's a very special, it's a very unique cadence. It's got its own name. It's called plagal, P-L-A-G-A-L, plagal cadence, 4-to-1, not 5-to-1, 4-to-1. So I can resolve to a C chord using an F chord. That's another way to resolve to a C chord. I can also do, look at that middle example there, I can do an F. Maybe I can even do an which is the 4 chord. I could even do a 4 minor with a 6th on it, which would be an F minor 6. Don't get bothered by all the fancy names. Just understand that I can switch those 2 chords in there too. That one kind of almost gives a little bit of a melancholy pull to the sound. So you'll hear that used a lot in Disney songs. In Beatles songs, they'll use those a lot too. F. That plagal cadence. Look at the next one. I can even do, remember how we did a secondary dominant, a 5 of a 5 a few examples back. Now we're going to do a 4 of a 4. Oh, this is wild. Okay, so we're in the key of C. Let's follow what's happening. The 4 of the key of C would be an F. But what would be the 4 chord of F? Well, F, G, A, B flat. So the progression is going to be a B flat to an F to a C. Let's see how that sounds. Oh, man. Let me play it for you again. You think, oh, what a strange sounding cadence. I get by with a little help from my friends. Da 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 da. 4 of a 4 to the 4 to the 1. It's that little progression right there. So that's another way that I can resolve to the 1 chord, a very creative way to do it. Oh, what's that? What else can we do? Let's go down another way to do it. Another thing, I can precede a 1 chord, or the target chord that I'm going for. And this one actually works in major or minor. You can precede it by a half step down, and you're going to do a diminished chord. So if I'm in the key of C, a half step lower than a C is a B diminished. A B diminished. So if I get my C and then a B diminished, let me do that again. C. What if I was going to an F chord? Okay. Well, that's one of 4, but I can still use the same trick. I put the little half diminished or I put the diminished a half step below the F. So before that F, an E diminished, which gets me to that F. Isn't it just fascinating? All the different ways that I can get back home. I can all get back to a one chord. I like to think of it as a basketball game and how the players move the ball around. It's not really about getting the ball in the basket. It's how they're able to do it. And that's a lot of how I think harmony works. It's not about just getting it to one. It's how you can get it to one that creates all the wonderful tension and excitement and creativity in the sound. Take a look at the next one. This is page 4. We're almost through. We're almost through this first batch. Another thing I can do when I'm going to a one chord, remember these work on any major chord. I can do the 2, which would be a D minor, but I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to make it a minor 7 flat 5, a D, F, A flat, and C. That has that melancholy sound again. Well, let's figure out why. Before, we had that melancholy sound was on the chord, the 4 chord, but we made it minor, and we added a 6, which would be an F, A flat, C, and a D. And here I'm saying, hey, you can also do that on the 2, where I'm making a minor 7 flat 5. What are the notes in a minor 7 flat 5? D, F, A flat, C. Does that sound familiar to the 4 minor 6, which is F, A flat, C, and D? They're not similar, they're identical. It's the same grouping of notes. So it's just another way that you can use to visualize that pull to the one chord. All right, so there's some kind of standard ones. Let's kind of break out of the box here for just a little bit, and then we'll cover the rest next time. The other things we can do, oh my goodness, what do we have now? We've got a non-diatonic, or what we call in the biz a chromatic chord progression, a chromatic cadence, a non-diatonic. Diatonic means within the scale. So we are non-diatonic. So what we are saying is this is a chord option that is not in the scale. It's not a normal 2, a normal 3, a normal 4. It's not any of that. It's adjusted. So look what I have here. I have a C major 7th. I have a 2 minor, which is a D minor 7th. And then I have this D flat major 7th. C major 7th. So let's hear how that sounds. Ooh, very interesting. Kind of sounds jazzy. A D minor, but instead of the 5 chord, instead of the G7, I substituted a D flat major 7th to resolve to that C major 7th. That's a little trick. One of the things that I can do to resolve to any major chord is go a half step above it, keep the type of chord that I'm resolving to, in this case a C major 7th, and I'm going to do a half step above it, which is a D flat major 7th, to the C major 7. Let's listen, let's hear how that sounds. Very interesting sound. What's another way we can do? Well, we could do, it works with approaching a chord by its exact type, but it also works a different way. Take a look at the next example. I could go from a D minor to a dominant 7th, D7th, before that C major. So I'm substituting the 5 chord again, the G7, and I'm substituting in not a D flat major 7th, but a D flat 7th, or, you know, anything that has a color tone with it, D flat 9, D flat 13, something like that. So let's hear how this sounds. So I've got a C major 7th here, and then I've got an A minor 7th, which is just the 6 minor, nothing's unique about that. Then I have a 2 minor, D minor 7th, then a D flat 9, how beautiful is that? And just to show you that this works in other situations too, if I was going to the 4 chord, Then I do the 2 of the 4 chord. In this case, the 4 chord is an F, so the second step of an F scale is a G minor. And then I would do a G flat 7th, which is going to get me to that F major. So listen to that. Oh, come on, it's starting to get fun. Starting to get fun. And you can add different color tones with those as well. One more. I'll try and squeeze one more into you. Not only can I do that D flat 7 to lead to the C major 7th, but I can also do one very unique thing. I'm going to do a D flat 7, but I'm going to add the flatted 5th of the D flat 7, which is a G. Okay, so a D flat, you have to think, I know it's in a lot of flats, but you got a D flat, an F, an A flat, and then you've got this C flat, okay? And then you've got, but the flatted 5th, so instead of the A flat, we're going to have a G. So you end up with this sort of a weird sounding chord. But look what it is. Now let's switch. You think, how can I switch a D flat 7, substitute that in for a G7? Well, what notes are in a, let's say, a G7 flat 5? A G, F, B natural, D flat. Hey, wait a minute. Those are the exact same notes as a D flat 7 flat 5. It is an exact mirror of the same notes. They're not similar, they are the exact same notes, but they're a mirror of each other. And that happens at a specific interval that is 3 whole steps away from each other. So a G to A, that's one whole step. A to B, that's another whole step. B to C sharp or D flat, that's the 3rd whole step. G to D flat or C sharp is exactly 3 whole steps away from each other, and that's called a magic interval. That's a tritone. And so if I added this now tritone chord into it, I have a C major 7th, D minor 11th, D flat 7 flat 5. That one sounds particularly good when you're doing sort of Latin stuff. It's an interesting progression there, that D flat 7 flat 5, and it'll work in front of anything. Let's say I was going to the F chord. There it is again, G flat 7 flat 5. It's just a half step above the F, and I do a dominant 7 with a flat 5, and that will get me there. Ooh, just interesting ways of how you can move around in between chords. This is part 1. I'm going to take you down a whole nother road for part 2. We're going to cover a few more majors, and then we're going to get into how we can resolve to minor chords. But all of this is just really fascinating in how you can move chords around. Don't overly worry about the theory. Just learn how you can use it. I go a half step above whatever target chord I'm at and play a dominant 7 flat 5, and I got a really hip progression. It's just an interesting way of doing that. Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Learn all you can. We'll see you next time for part 2. Big Steve is asking, why is the 4th chord also a landing spot? Because it is a major chord. And it's just an important chord, probably the next to most important chord in any key other than the 1 chord. The 5 chord is a unique sound. It's kind of a doorway to get to the 1. So the 5 chord doesn't really have a purpose on its own other than to get to somewhere else. So even though it is major, we kind of treat it very, very differently. Lots of fun things you can do with it. Man, the possibilities are limitless. But it's not really a place that I land a lot. I land on the 1 chord and the 5 chord, or excuse me, 1 chord and the 4 chord, and the 4 chord is kind of thought of as a home away from home, something I can resolve to. There you go. Anyway, so just some fun stuff with that. I hope you guys found that interesting. Don't get too knocked out with the theory and bothered by the theory of it all. Just learn how they work. Boy, you get good at switching a few of these, and folks think you're a guitar master, and all I'm doing is just doing a few of these tricks. I just listed, about a dozen little tricks I can do, and so I got a few more, and then I got a few more in minor. and you learn a couple of those, couple of voicings that go along with it, and you're off and running. How often should you be changing your strings? That's a good question. The importance of changing your strings is pretty. You can leave your strings on forever. It's just not going to sound very good. And strings start to go dead. They start to get a lifelessness about the string. There's no presence. There's no zing in the string. That's because physically what's going on is you've got the oils from your fingers are getting gunked up onto that string, and it's muting the higher frequencies of the string. So if you ever notice when you put brand new strings on, boy, they just have this presence, this really zing to them. All right, that's the beauty of new strings. You want to make your guitar sound better instantly without having to buy a new guitar? Change your strings. It's a great thing. How often do I change my strings? I try to change my strings. Now, granted, I'm playing a lot. I'm playing an hour or two a day. I try and change my strings about once every 3 months. I'd say for the average player who's just kind of playing on the weekends and things like that, and you may not be in a performing sort of situation, you can get by with maybe stretching that to 6 months. It's not going to hurt your guitar if you keep them on there for a year. It's going to kind of gunk up your strings, and your fingers aren't going to be able to slide across the strings as quick as you need them to do. So it's always just a good habit to wash your hands before you play. I wash my hands generally before I play. If there's any way that I possibly can, right before I play, I wash my hands to get those oils off my fingers, so then I'm not going to transfer them onto the strings and thus deaden my strings. Now, there are some things, fret ease and things like this that you can put on your strings, but my question to you is, don't do that. Why would you want to put something that is going to deaden your strings? It would make them slicker, is the answer. And sometimes you need the slickness more than you need the tone, and so you have to make that judgment there. But most of the time, I need the tone more than I need the slickness. So I would say for the average player, somewhere between 2-3 months and 6 months, you should be changing your strings on your guitar. And find the right strings that work for you. I use the D'Addario NYXLs on my electrics these days, and I use the D'Addario XS's for my acoustics. This is just, I believe I have just a regular light set on this one currently. Thomas is asking, what pickup am I using with my Gibson, and how are you happy with it live? Okay, in here, I'm not exactly sure of the exact type, but I believe it's a Fishman sort of a setup. It's got a little volume knob here. I've used it live quite a bit, and I'm very happy with it. It is prone to feedback, like all of them would be. So I have to constantly be watching feedback. Sometimes I'll need to put a little feedback buster in here. The one thing on the feedback buster is sometimes it'll hit this little volume knob here, and I've had that rip off, and I've had to go to get it fixed at Gruen's when it does that. So that I've used it a lot. Now, I would like to get a different pickup. I'm in the process of kind of researching that now, and I would love to get kind of a K&K setup, which is what a lot of the serious players are using now. Either they're normal just in under the saddle, or a combination of the undersaddle and the microphone. So I'm currently researching those K&K pickups, and I really like them. So I wouldn't, if you want to donate to Steve's pickup fund, you can do that. We do have our Fall Fingerstyle Retreat coming up in October, the 23rd through the 26th. Only 5 slots left on that if you're interested in being a part of our Fall Fingerstyle Retreat. I played a song, It Had to Be You, a few weeks back. Probably it's been maybe 2 months ago now. The arrangement that I had at that point, I was just starting to kind of mess around with the song. And so the arrangement's kind of evolved a little bit now, and it's turned into something else. Lily, our wonderful student in Australia, was asking if I could play it again. I'm using on my baritone, my Harvey Benton baritone. Nothing too fancy about it, but it does get a really interesting sound. Really good for jazz. So here's a little bit of It Had to Be You.